supporting our work. I feel like I should start by giving you a little bit of background and explain how we got to become the South Coast Welcome. I grew up in a family that was Catholic initially, and then we became members of the United Church of Christ when I was around 10. My parents chose to leave the Catholic Church in 1976 because they were adopting my younger sister, Missy, from South Korea. And when they told the parish priest that they would be adopting a child from South Korea, he asked them, why would you ever want to adopt one of those babies? It was much worse than that, but I don't want to use the phrase here. To say that my parents were horrified was an understatement. And my parents later went on to adopt a second child from South Korea, my brother Jonathan. My parents were also one of the 5 families who welcomed a refugee family from Vietnam to live in our town growing up in Norway. Both of these events really were instrumental in shaping who I am today. After college, I joined the Peace Corps and served for 3 years in Honduras in Central America. I had majored in Latin American studies in college and learned a great deal about El Salvador through our church's involvement with a healthcare center there. My experiences in Peace Corps even further shaped my desire to work for social justice. I met and married a man from Honduras when we moved to the United States in 1996. We moved to Wichita, Kansas, because I entered graduate school there and earned my master's in education and became a Spanish teacher. My twins, Nicole and Daniela, were born right as I finished graduate school, and sadly I ended up divorcing and we moved back here to New England. Not long after I moved to Fairhaven, I felt the need to find some type of spiritual connection as well as religious education for my girls. I was drawn to this congregation by the strong RE program. My girls are now college graduates, and I'm proud to say that the RE program of this church had a huge part in shaping them into the wonderful women that they are today. What has kept me involved in this church is the connections that I have made here, as well as this church's strong focus on social justice. Before COVID, I was a part of a group who created the South Coast Immigration Support Network. Working with the Community and Economic Development Center in New Bedford, we established a network of drivers to bring immigrants to their immigration appointments. Many of these appointments were at ICE in Burlington, Mass., which is the office is behind the Burlington Mall. It's not on a bus or train line, and many of these immigrants, because back then they could not have a driver's license, so many of them were having to pay upwards of $100 to $200 a month for rides to get to this appointment. We were able to set up a whole network of drivers and help them avoid this cost. This network kind of has faded because it's no longer needed. Most of the ICE appointments nowadays are in virtual, so that kind of has that work faded out. But my interest in the working with the immigrants continued even as COVID raged. Elizabeth Murphy from our church, with the help from many of us, set up a kind of unofficial food bank during COVID, and we began to do porch drop-offs to some of these immigrant families because most of them lost their jobs during COVID when everything shut down. As the pandemic waned, then this particular project became not as needed. Fast forward to today, 2023. The South Coast Welcome Corps was founded earlier this year when I saw an announcement from the federal government about a new program called the Welcome Corps. For more than 40 years, the Department of State has partnered primarily with nonprofit resettlement agencies to provide the initial resettlement assistance needed to newly arriving refugees. This program called the Welcome Corps creates new opportunities for Americans and communities around the country to engage directly in refugee resettlement, building upon existing opportunities to volunteer within the resettlement agencies. Upon reading about this new program, I reached out on Slack to see if anyone else from this church was interested in forming a group with me to sponsor a refugee family. I got an immediate yes. Laura Gardner, Amy Boyer, Elizabeth Murphy, and Kari Tyler all responded immediately with a big yes. So we started meeting earlier this year in the spring and working through the paperwork and the process to welcome a family to Fairhaven. There are many, many steps involved in this. We opened a bank account, we even started doing some fundraising. And then we kind of hit a few snags. By August of this year, we had all grown frustrated with this process and how slow things were moving. So we made the decision that we were going to go in a different direction. Elizabeth Murphy now works for the CEDC, and our church has had a long relationship with the CEDC. So we decided maybe we should look at some ways we can support the efforts they do with the CEDC. As soon as we made that decision, we found out that the town of Fairhaven was going to be welcoming some unsheltered families to the Seaport Hotel. Many of them were, most of them are refugees. After that announcement was made by town, of course, social media blew up with all kinds of hatred about these families coming to live in our town. I texted the other women and asked if they wanted to help me in support welcoming these families into Fairhaven. And of course, they said yes again. So we went into action to begin planning for the welcome rally, which took place the first weekend in October. Many of you joined us at that rally, and we can't tell you how much we really appreciated all of your support then. Ironically, that day of the rally, there was not even one family in the hotel yet. But we proved to the people of Fairhaven that Fairhaven is a welcoming place. Despite all the hatred that stood on the opposite side of the street, we easily outnumbered them 2-1. Since that day, families have started arriving at the Seaport Hotel. The town administrator was very proactive in organizing a meeting of all the town churches and different boards in town to figure out what would be needed to help support these families. Not long after that initial meeting, the town reached out to me and asked me if I would be their official connection to volunteers. Would I coordinate the volunteer part? In these first initial weeks, things have been very chaotic. The National Guard is assigned to the hotel by the governor to help resettle all these families in different communities across the state. But the communication line is very, very difficult. Guards people are frequently moved around from town to town based on the different situations in each town. There are people in hotels in Dartmouth, Wareham, Swansea, Somerset, and those are all the ones that I know of off the top of my head. So we are currently working with our third guards person in charge here in Fairhaven. And I have to say at this very moment, we're still kind of in a triage mode. We are trying to connect the families with services and make sure they have enough food and clothing. We are slowly working on a way to set up a ride system and collecting donations for them. Each of us in the group, and by the way, we've added Bethany Giamalvo to our group now, so we're up to 6 people. We're taking on specific roles in the coming weeks and to try to share the burden a little bit more. This project is not going to go away anytime soon. It continues to grow and enrich each of us. A few weeks ago, one of the National Guard's people called us to ask if we could take a family to Walmart. And Amy Boyer volunteered because she has a nice big minivan, and that's when we met Evans and his family of 4 kids. Since then, we've been spending time with the family most weekends. Some of you even got to meet them on Halloween when we brought them trick-or-treating. So it's a relationship that I think all of us can say has really enriched our lives. And we at the South Coast Welcome Corps are very grateful for all of the support this church has given us with this project. And we are looking forward to working with all of you as we continue to support these families.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you so much to each of you. It makes me so happy. I don't know, there's something unusually weird, but that's okay. It really makes me happy not only for myself to learn more each day about who you are and more about the soul and the commitment of this community, but it also makes me really happy to perhaps facilitate you hearing from one another too. Because the one thing COVID did was it isolated all of us from one another, and I don't know, at least for me, it made me forget some of the connections that, or even how to continue some of those relationships that had been important beforehand. Disrupted so many things. So thank you again for this important work. I do want to share some words from the poet Alberto Ríos. You may know by now that he's one of my favorites. The opening to this short poem is this: one river gives its journey to the next. We give because someone gave to us. We give because nobody gave to us. We give because giving has changed us. We give because giving could have changed us. We've been better for it. We've been wounded by it. Giving has many faces. It's loud. It's quiet. Big though small. Diamond in wood nails. Its story is old. Its plot is worn, and the pages too, but we read this book anyway, over and over again. Giving is first, every time, hand to hand, mine to yours, and yours to mine. You gave me blue, I gave you yellow, and together we are green. You gave me what you did not have, and I gave you what I had to give. Together, we made something greater from the difference. In January of 2010, the Supreme Court of the United States ratified the power of money. It ratified the power of money in its famous Citizens United decision, which essentially granted more rights to money than women enjoy in this country. There is no amendment to the Constitution that guarantees equal rights of women, as much as we've tried for, 5-6 decades? But power is now enshrined. Money has voice. Where most of us, when it comes to money, if not all, and I won't speak for anybody else, but most of us can feel powerless in the face of money interests, and in the face of how money somehow functions independently of everything else. It sets the standards. It constrains us, or it amplifies our lives, but somehow the connection and our empowerment over it is not as clear. Now, I speak as someone who is part of the 60 to 70% of all people in this nation who were never taught any kind of financial literacy, right? I wasn't taught how to use money. I wasn't taught how to think about money. All my brother and I knew was that there wasn't enough, so turnip greens were really popular on our menu for several months one time. But, we weren't impoverished. We had everything we needed. We didn't get Christmas presents, but that's probably more of a political decision than the economic one, but I never asked, so I never found out for sure. What happens when we don't talk about money and we let money talk for us? The truth of the matter is, my friends, and I'm going to come to church in a minute because I don't intend to keep you long past 11 o'clock. But the truth of the matter is that in its Citizens United decision, the Supreme Court of the United States ratified something that had been true from the beginning of the great American experiment. What I will call, as many others have called, the system of violent, extractive capitalism was there from the beginning. The idea that was and has been and still is a very common narrative is that somehow this system gives everyone an equal opportunity to make the life that they want, to make the wealth, the opportunity, and the chances, the openings to have everything they want. And that's simply not true. Capitalism, I mean, you know this, we all know this intuitively, but yet the narrative is still, if you're poor, you are deficient because you haven't taken advantage, you're lazy, you're this, that, or the other. We've all heard this, you don't need me probably to repeat it. But capitalism in any form depends on those who can be exploited to make those fortunes. Chattel slavery, the horrific institution of chattel slavery in the United States, was not created because the general sentiment was that Black people from Africa are not human. It was created because free labor makes fortunes grow faster. And once one made the initial investment of purchasing one's labor, then that labor, as humans do, reproduced itself at a very, very modest cost. The decision to officially dehumanize those captured and forced into this institution was also ratified by the United States Supreme Court, but that came much, much later. I say this to say and to offer up some questions that I'm all over and I don't often have super satisfactory answers for myself, but it's important to me to ask the questions so that I can grow in this capacity. Because the truth is, I aspire to be like the man in that story. I competed with the sound system to tell you earlier this morning. Right? I aspire to be that person who empties her pockets, and sometimes I do, and sometimes I turn my head because, what if I don't have enough? But here's the thing. If our system is in fact a system that will extract, and now has an official voice that will extract everything it can from every resource, including human beings, including every part of the planet, its air, its water, its Arctic ice, its plants, its rainforests, in order to keep that machine of wealth growing. That system will not change itself. A scorpion will not stop stinging. It is in its nature. And if that system doesn't change, you probably don't need me to tell you what the inevitable consequences are. So here are the questions. Is it possible that those of us in places like this, in sanctuaries like this around the world or in other organizations who come, whose hearts are opened by what people like Kelly and others and activists tell us and teach us, and we open our pockets and we give, and we have this belief in goodness that we want to live in our lives? Is it possible that when it comes to our own conversations about money and how it functions in our organizations and how we talk about it, that without knowing it, we'd apply different values? What are the values of capitalism? Particularly capitalism that pursues its goals at the cost of everything else. competition, right? The individual and the individual's happiness and right to get what the individual wants. Any other values? In a beautiful and really interesting piece in the latest issue of the nonprofit quarterly, I want to tell you their names because they're really brilliant. I know that one of them is named Cordery. Constance Will Cordery and Constance Page Young proposed a different idea. They said, what if in our philanthropy, and mind you, giving to churches is by far the biggest chunk of philanthropy in the United States. What if the values that guided us in our conversations, in our giving, living our lives here and in our communities, what if those values were the values of reparative healing? Which are in fact the values of our faith, right? Like the notion of tikkun olam in Judaism, our values are to repair the world, to bring healing, literally to love the hell out of the world, right? What are the values of reparative healing? To focus on community healing and health rather than the health and wealth of the individual. To look for the leadership of those most impacted by these exploitative and often violent conditions, and to follow their leadership as you have described in your talk. What if when we made them, and please understand, I'm not criticizing anybody, I'm just asking these questions and invite us to be curious and to consider as a congregation having these conversations. What if the guiding principle were, what needs repair? And I don't mean the building. Who needs repair in this community and beyond the walls of this community? And how do we open our pockets in service of that repair? There's an old African proverb that says that until the lion tells its story, the hunter is always the hero. Good proverb, right? Who tells the story? How does money speak? I look forward to engaging with you in all of this. Amen, dear ones. Ashe, and blessed be.